Episode 1. Introduction. Brian was walking home. The street was nearly empty. Just a few pedestrians hurrying home after a long day. He didn't like evening walks, but his old sedan had refused to start again. And calling a taxi seemed like too much trouble. Besides, the weather was pleasant. A light breeze, the smell of rain that was just about to start. He was thinking about little things. What to make for dinner, whether to watch a movie before bed. Everything was calm. Until he noticed a man under a dim streetlight. The man was standing, leaning against the wall, looking as if he had just run a marathon. His chest was rising and falling rapidly, his hands trembling. His eyes were darting around, as if searching for someone. Brian wasn't the kind of person who got involved in other people's business. If it weren't for one detail. The man was looking directly at him. "Please," he said softly, but desperately enough to make Brian stop. The man took an uncertain step forward. "Help me. They're here. They're watching." Brian furrowed his brow. "Who?" The man glanced over his shoulder again, as if hoping to see someone in the dark. "I can't explain. Just don't leave me." Brian stared at him, torn between the urge to walk away and a strange feeling that this encounter wasn't a coincidence. If it had been some drunk homeless guy, he wouldn't have even stopped. But this man looked different. His clothes were clean, though rumpled. His face was tired, but not unkempt. This wasn't just some street oddball. "All right," Brian said slowly. "What do you want?" "5 minutes. Just to talk. This doesn't seem like some attempt to sell me insurance." The man gave a weak smile, but it was more of a grimace than a real expression of emotion. "Believe me, I'd rather discuss anything else than this." Brian looked at his watch. 10:43 p.m. He could just walk away. But again, there was something about this man that stopped him. He sighed. "Okay, but make it quick." Sometimes, we make choices without even realizing the consequences. A small gesture, one decision, a quick yes or no. And life will never be the same. In these moments, you don't yet know that your help will change everything. The man stepped closer, but not so much that he seemed threatening. He spoke quickly, quietly, as if afraid someone might overhear him. "They can't know I spoke to you. But when it all begins, when you realize, remember, a rabbit doesn't run unless it sees the hunter." Brian frowned. "What does that mean?" "You'll find out soon." And suddenly, the man shoved him back. Brian barely kept his balance, and when he looked up, the stranger was already running across the street. Then he saw them, 2 men in black coats. They were walking slowly, but with that confidence that makes you realize they know exactly where they're going. And they were looking directly at him. Brian felt cold sweat run down his back. What the hell is going on? Episode 2. The Chase. Brian didn't like to panic. He was the type of man who always assessed the situation coolly. But when the 2 strangers in cloaks began moving towards him, he felt that same animal instinct that made his heart beat faster. They weren't in a rush, not running, but something about their stride was off, like sharks slowly circling before a lunge. He quickly looked around. The stranger had disappeared down an alley, blending into the night's darkness. "Damn!" Brian turned his gaze back. The men were already closer. They didn't look like typical robbers. There was no chaos or aggression in their movements, only cold, almost mechanical confidence. "No, this is crazy." Brian tried to calm himself. Maybe it's just a coincidence? Or a prank? But then one of them tilted his head, as if listening to something invisible, and took a step forward. There was no time left for thought. Brian bolted. He ran down the narrow alley, trying not to lose his breath. His heart pounded in his chest, and the only question in his mind was, "What the hell have I gotten myself into?" It seemed like he had lost them, but when he peeked around the corner, the men were there. They weren't running. They simply appeared. How? Brian wasn't a believer. He didn't believe in the supernatural. But something here wasn't right. Stopping for a moment, he took a deep breath. "You brought this on yourself, Brian," he muttered. "Weird guy, weird pursuers, weird night, great." Brian. He froze. They knew his name. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't just some robbery. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "Stop," one of the men said. His voice was low, even almost emotionless. "You shouldn't run." Brian took a step back. "Yeah, sure, I'll just stop and let you what? Take me to some black van." The second man slowly tilted his head. "We don't want to harm you." Brian scoffed. "Sounds like you're about to do exactly that." He stepped back another step. "Listen, guys, I don't know what's going on, but this is some kind of mistake." The first man smiled. "Are you sure?" That smile sent shivers down Brian's spine. At that moment, the doors of a black SUV parked by the curb swung open. "If you want to live, get in," someone shouted from the inside. Brian didn't hesitate. He jumped into the car, and it immediately sped off. The men remained standing, not even attempting to chase. "All right," Brian gasped. "Now, explain to me, what the hell is going on?" The driver, a man in a leather jacket with short dark hair, glanced at him through the rear-view mirror. "You're already inside the game, buddy. Now you'll have to learn how to play." Brian leaned back in the seat, feeling that his life would never be the same again. Episode 3. The game has begun. Brian sat in the car, trying to collect his thoughts. His heart was still racing, and his lungs ached after the frantic escape. He looked at the driver, the stranger in the leather jacket who had pulled him out of trouble. "Okay, let's take it step by step." Brian ran his hand over his face. What the hell was that? Who are they? And what does the game mean? The driver glanced at him sideways in the rearview mirror. "Relax, buddy. First, let's make sure we're not being followed." The SUV sharply turned into an alley, skidding on the wet asphalt. Brian almost hit his head on the window. "Listen, I don't know who you are, but," he sighed. "What's your name, anyway?" The driver smiled slightly. "Call me Alex." "Well, Alex," Brian clenched his fists, "I need answers. And I need them now." Alex nodded and made another sharp turn. "You helped a stranger, right?" he asked. Brian tensed. "Yeah. And what did he tell you before he disappeared?" Brian thought for a moment. "Those strange words," he said. "Don't open the black box." Alex looked at him, and something like concern flickered in his eyes. "Shit! What? What does that mean?" Alex didn't answer. He just pressed harder on the gas pedal. "All right." Brian rubbed his temples. "Listen, I'm just an ordinary guy. I'm not a spy, not a detective. I'm just a damn accountant. Why are they after me?" Alex smiled at the corner of his mouth. "If you think you're ordinary, buddy, you need to reconsider your biography." Brian leaned back irritably in his seat. Well, then explain it to me. Alex stayed silent. Then, he suddenly slammed the brakes at an old motel on the outskirts of town. First, we need to go inside. It's safer here. The motel looked, to put it mildly, run down. The sign flickered, and there was no one at the registration desk. Alex pulled out keys from under an old newspaper, as if he'd known this trick for a long time. Let's go. He nodded towards a room at the end of the hallway. Brian hesitated, but followed him anyway. The room was as grim as the motel itself. Old furniture, a TV covered in a thick layer of dust, the only light source being a dim ceiling lamp. Alex locked the door and looked at Brian. Sit. You're acting like it's a movie, Brian grumbled, but sat down anyway. Alex took a pack of cigarettes from his pocket, absently fiddling with it in his hands, but not lighting one. Okay. First, you need to understand one thing. Everything that's happening is no coincidence. Are you serious? I was just heading home, saw a scared guy, helped him, and now you're in trouble. Big trouble. Brian wanted to argue, but then he remembered how those men had known his name. You're kidding. Alex looked at him in a way that made him uneasy. They knew who you were. They were looking for you. But why? Alex tossed a phone onto the table. Look. Brian took the phone and turned on the screen. A file. One single file. He clicked on it and saw his own photo. What the? That's why they want you. Brian felt panic tightening around his chest. What the hell have I done? Alex slowly exhaled. It's not that simple, Brian. This game started long before you even knew about it. Brian stared at his photo on a stranger's phone, realizing one thing. He was in deep trouble, and there was no way out in sight. Episode 4. The Past That Won't Let Go. Brian couldn't take his eyes off the screen. His own face stared back at him from a stranger's phone. The photo was recent, taken no more than a few days ago. How the hell did this get here? His voice was tense. Alex sat across from him and lit a cigarette, finally gathering the courage. The smoke slowly rose to the ceiling, casting eerie shadows. That's not a question for me, Brian. It's a question for you. Brian looked at him with disbelief. What are you talking about? I don't even understand what's going on. Alex nodded, as if he'd expected that response. Listen, are you sure you know everything about your past? About yourself? Brian grunted. I'm a normal guy who works in an office. I live an ordinary life. I have a cat. I don't play dirty games. I don't have debts. Why would anyone be following me? Alex sighed, snuffed out his cigarette, and pressed his fingers to his temples. All right, then explain this to me. He pulled a phone from his pocket and handed it to Brian. Brian took the device, pressed the screen, and saw a video. He hit play. The camera wobbled, as if it was filmed on a phone. A dark room, a table, and sitting behind it was, This is me. Brian felt his blood run cold. In the video, it was him, only he looked different. His eyes were cold, devoid of their usual warmth. He was talking to someone, but there was no sound. What the hell is this? Alex watched him closely, studying his reaction. That's you, Brian. Only not exactly. What does that mean? Is this a montage? A prank? Alex shook his head. Keep watching. The video lasted only a minute. In the recording, Brian leaned toward the table, wrote something on a sheet of paper, then looked up directly into the camera and smiled. The smile was unsettling. Brian threw the phone away. This is impossible. Alex pulled another document from his jacket and placed it in front of him. This is a record of a person you supposedly don't know, but their fingerprints are yours. Brian looked at the paper. There was a photo, his photo, but the caption under it was different. James Collins. Is this some kind of joke? No, it's the truth. Brian gasped for breath. You're trying to say that this isn't me? Alex smiled. Welcome to your own life, Brian. He stood up, cupping his head in his hands. No, this is some mistake. I'm not some James Collins. I have documents of family. Are they real? Alex crossed his arms over his chest. Brian froze. His documents. It was like something clicked in his mind. I was 22. I was driving on the highway. I got into an accident. Then what? Alex asked calmly. Brian closed his eyes. I woke up in the hospital with a concussion. And they told you that you had amnesia, right? Brian nodded slowly. Alex sat next to him. Have you ever checked your past? Brian stared blankly ahead. No. Alex touched his shoulder. Listen to me. You have two paths. Either you run, not asking any questions, or you search for the truth. Brian looked up at him. And what if I don't like what I find? Alex sighed. It doesn't matter anymore. He knew what he was going to do, and he knew it would change everything. Episode 5. The Echoes of a Forgotten Life. Brian sat in the darkness. He didn't know how much time had passed. 5 minutes? An hour? The words Alex had said still echoed in his mind. You either run, or you find out the truth. And the worst part was, he wasn't sure he wanted to know that truth. He lifted his head. Alex was silently smoking by the window, staring thoughtfully at the city lights. All right. Brian finally broke the silence. What now? Alex slowly turned around. Now, you make a choice. If you stay, I'll show you things that can't be unseen. Brian felt his heart tighten. You're saying I was someone else? Alex smiled, but there was no joy in his eyes. Oh, Brian. It's not about who you were. It's about who you are. Brian clenched his teeth. Just tell me the truth. Alex nodded and pulled a small black notebook from his jacket. He placed it in front of him. Open it. Brian hesitated. His fingers trembled as he took the notebook and flipped it open. On the first page was a note. James Collins. Don't forget. His breath caught in his throat. He turned the page. There were lists, names, dates. Each line was followed by brief notes. Marcus Gray. Disappeared on April 12th. Last seen near the warehouses on 8th Avenue. Sarah Norton. Kidnapped. Only her phone was found. Richard Lawrence. No trace. Only a note. James, you're next. Brian felt a cold sweat break out on his back. What is this? Alex spoke quietly. This is a list of people who disappeared. Everyone you knew. Brian shook his head. No, this is some mistake. Alex sighed. Think, Brian. Deep inside, you know this is the truth. No. Brian jumped up abruptly. This is all a lie. I'm just an office worker. An office worker who's being filmed on camera, whose name is in the notes next to the missing people. Brian clenched his fists. I don't remember anything. Alex tilted his head to the side. Maybe that's because someone helped you forget. Those words hit like an electric shock. Brian sat back down, clutching his head. His thoughts tangled, the faces of the people on the list changing before his eyes, as if he should know them, but couldn't remember. How do I prove this? Alex smiled. First, you'll call one person. He placed another phone in front of Brian. An old, worn-out device. Who? Alex looked at him. You know who. Brian opened the contact list. There was only one number. No name. He dialed it. Hello? A woman's voice. Warm. Familiar. Brian couldn't breathe. Is it you? The woman paused for a few seconds. Oh my God, Brian. You're still alive. His fingers tightened around the phone. Who am I? The woman took a deep breath. I'm your sister. Episode 6. The Shadow of the Past. The silence was almost deafening. Brian held the phone to his ear, but couldn't utter a single word. Brian. The voice on the other end trembled. Can you hear me? It's me, Emily. Emily. Something about that name pierced through the darkness of his memory, like a beam of light through a crack in clothes curtains. Sister? He whispered. Yes. God. I thought you, that they, her voice trembled. Brian tightened his grip on the phone. Who are they? What happened? On the other end, there were short, strained breaths. This isn't a phone call, she whispered. They might be listening. A chill ran down his spine. Where are you? A safe place. But you need to run, Brian. Right now. Alex touched his shoulder. Ask her about the Onyx project. Brian repeated the question. Silence fell on the other end. Do you already know? Her voice was quiet, almost indecipherable. Know what? What they did to you. The silence was broken by a sound. Distant, almost inaudible, a click. Damn. Emily quickly spoke again. They're on the line. Brian, listen. You can't trust them. Not even those who seem like friends. A loud crackling noise followed. Then silence. The connection was cut off. Brian froze, listening to the beep in the receiver. They found us, Alex said, and quickly rushed to the window. Brian felt his heart explode in his chest. What do you mean? Found? Look for yourself. Alex nodded toward the street. Brian approached the window and looked down. 3 black SUVs were parked directly beneath the building. The headlights cut through the darkness, and the silhouettes of people in suits were moving toward the entrance. We need to run. Now, Alex hissed, and without waiting, pulled Brian out of the room. They raced through the narrow corridors of the old hotel until they heard heavy footsteps below. Up or down? Brian gasped. Down is a trap. Only the roof. They rushed upward. Behind them, the door slammed open. They're already here. Brian shouted. Alex pulled out a gun. If they want to take us, they'll have to work for it. They burst onto the roof. The night wind slapped their faces. Jump to the neighboring building? Brian rasped. Alex squinted. Could be an option. Behind them, the door crashed open. Stop. Brian turned around. At the threshold stood a man in a black coat. His face was partially hidden by shadow. But one thing was clear to Brian right away. He knew him. Oh my God! It slipped out of him. Alex glanced from Brian to the stranger. Who is that? The man took a step forward. Don't run, James, he said. My name is Brian, he forced out. But deep inside, he already knew it was a lie. "No," the man smiled. "You're James Collins, and this is your last chance to remember the truth." Episode 7. The Choice. The cold wind struck his face, but Brian barely felt it. His body froze, as if paralyzed by the stranger's words. "James Collins," he repeated, as if trying to get used to the sound of it. His heart raced wildly, but deep inside, something clicked, like a mechanism inside a clock. This name. It made sense. "It's a lie." Alex stepped forward, holding his weapon. "Don't listen to him, Brian. His name isn't Brian." The stranger moved closer as well. "And you know it. The choice." Brian felt the world around him narrowing. He saw himself. Dozens of memories flooding his mind, as if someone had suddenly turned on the light in a dark room. Childhood. Hospital walls. People in white coats telling him he was special. Surgeries. Implants. And blood. "What did they do to me?" Brian James whispered, looking at the stranger. The man stopped. "What they were supposed to do. You're the perfect creation of the Onyx Project. They erased your memory, gave you a new life. But you were never Brian." The words took his breath away. Alex snapped. "He's lying to you. Then why do I remember this?" Brian turned to him, and for the first time, there was certainty in his eyes. Silence fell. "I'm James Collins," he said the words slowly, as if testing whether they sounded true. They did. The stranger nodded. "Now you need to make a choice." "The choice?" Alex raised the gun. "Don't listen to him, Brian. You only have one choice." "I know," said Brian, and pulled the trigger. Culmination. An unexpected shot. The bullet struck precisely in the chest, but not the stranger. Alex. His eyes widened in shock. "Damn!" he exhaled, slowly sinking to his knees. Brian lowered the gun. "I remember." Alex still tried to say something, but blood was already soaking his shirt. His last words were, "You made the wrong choice." He fell face down. Silence followed. Brian breathed heavily. "Well done, James," said the stranger. "Now what?" "Now you go home." Brian looked out at the city below him. His life was over, and it began anew. Episode 8. Consequences. Brian stood still, staring at Alex's lifeless body. The air still smelled of gunpowder. His fingers still gripped the gun, but now it felt like just a piece of metal. The stranger approached, placing a hand on his shoulder. That was the only way out. Brian wanted to believe that. But was it really the only way out? What now? His voice sounded almost detached. "We leave here." Brian nodded slowly. But as he stepped back, he noticed something. Alex was smiling. What? Blood trickled from his mouth, but his lips twisted into a weak, barely noticeable grin. And then, a quiet, raspy sound. Alex laughed. Brian felt something inside him twist. He knelt, grabbing Alex by the jacket. What's so funny?" Alex sighed heavily. You really thought it was that easy?" Brian felt his heart tighten. "What do you mean?" Alex opened his eyes. They had darkened. You have no idea what you've just done." His voice held no anger, only a bitter, sarcastic sadness. Brian looked at the stranger. He said nothing, just watched. What's going on? Brian gritted his teeth. Alex coughed, spitting out blood. Welcome, James. Now you're one of them. What? Alex reached out, and, click, something in his palm gleamed with red light. Before Brian could react, a bright light flashed from the building across the street. He turned his head, and, bam! A powerful explosion shook the air, sending a cloud of dust and debris flying. Brian was thrown into the air, crashing onto the concrete. What the hell just happened? Coughing, he lifted his head. The building he had seen just moments ago, it was no longer there. Fire, screams, chaos. His brain struggled to piece it together. But one question hammered in his head. Did I do this? Alex was still breathing, but barely. You're one of them now. Brian felt the world tilt beneath his feet. He had killed a friend. He had trusted someone he didn't know. And now, his hands were not just stained with Alex's blood, but with the blood of hundreds in that building. His breathing became heavy. He looked at the stranger. He finally spoke. Now you see the truth, James. We were on the same side from the very beginning. Brian looked at his hands. They were shaking. What have I done? Silence. What you were destined to do.